This is the first part of a three-part interview that I've been engaged to do with Ben Schacter, the owner and managing broker of Signature Real Estate Services, a brokerage with over 1,000 agents, and also Marshall Sklar, the co-owner of Florida's Best Realty, an agency with over 500 brokers and agents. Both located in Boca Raton, Florida, one of the hottest real estate markets in South Florida, and across the nation for the last 20 years. Now, in this first part, I discuss interest rates, what I expect will happen with them in 2024, and how that will affect their sales. I also discuss recent changes in legislation and NRA regulations that affect broker commissions and how they are listed on MLS services all around the country and including South Florida. And in particular, how that is going to affect buyers' agents and what buyers pay in the coming year, in 2024.
I will make the brief introduction of Mr. McCabe, who is a friend and a advisor and one of the most brilliant minds in real estate. Saved me from probably going bankrupt in 2008 when the world was collapsing, and especially our industry. I knew Jack prior to that, and he and I met and spoke at a industry management network conference. I had a lot of properties when I was in college, and I was graduating 06. He goes, I would bail out and sell everything right now, and you'll be sitting pretty. Buy it back in a few years. Well, guess what? I sold everything in 06, 07. In 08, the world nearly collapsed, and I started buying everything back in 2010. Bottom line, since then, it's been a pretty good run thus far. So I attribute a lot of that to Jack's guidance and advice, and that's why every single year for the past 13, 14 years, we keep in touch, we communicate consistently, and I love hiring Jack to come and do a presentation talking about what's to come in the year ahead. He has been spot on, and I mean spot on for, let's see, since 2000, let's call it 6. So what's that, 18 years now? He's one of the only, if not probably the only person that when it comes to the media, CNN, Fox, whatever he's been featured on, every news network there is, you can Google his name and type in Jack McCabe Real Estate. You'll see. When Jack says something regarding the real estate market, I would say with 99.999% certainty, it's going to happen. His timing is almost flawless. His accuracy and his predictions are also almost flawless. And I love looking back every year. Like I looked at last year's questions and answers, and the year before, and the year before that. And so far, since we've been Zooming, since COVID started, the nice thing is these meetings are often recorded or at least very carefully noted. And I think you're batting 1,000. And if you're not batting 1,000, you're batting like 999. So that being said, we have a number of questions for this year, looking ahead towards 2024. It's been a tumultuous 2023 in the real estate market with interest rates quadrupling on some loans, housing prices throughout the nation. I'll summarize as unstable in 23, some areas up, some down, some flat, all predicted by Jack with amazing accuracy. And now we're going to focus this interview and meeting on what's to come in 2024 and how, as agents, investors, homeowners, operators in a number of facets of real estate, how to prepare yourself for what's to come. So without further ado, Mr. McCabe, welcome to the 2024 forecast meeting for South Florida real estate. Take the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marshall. That was a hell of a build-up. I hope I can come close to what you said, but thank you very much.
My pleasure. So, do you want me to start off with our first question that's on here? I'll read it out loud so everybody could hear, and then you can elaborate? Jack, I saw you say yes, but I just want to make sure we hear you.
Yes, go right
Okay.
ahead.
All right, good. Question number one is the Fed's very aggressive stance on inflation in 2023 saw mortgage rates reach 8%, while they were only 2.5% roughly in 2021. That's nearly a tripling of the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Given that these extremely high rates still didn't break the back of the market here in South Florida. When I say break the back, we didn't see anything close to '08 here. What do you suppose will happen when and if rates now drop, as they've actually been doing? If you look at the 10-year note today, it's trading at 4.10 right now, which is down almost a full point, which is 20% drop in less than 3 weeks, where it was on October 15th till now. 10 years down 1 full point. All right. So yeah, rates are down 20% in less than 6 weeks. Where does that take us in the future?
Well, and I think the mortgage rate now is down below 6% for the first time in a while as well. I think it's probably very noticeable to everyone watching that there has been a slowdown in different markets around the country. Now, South Florida has been very resilient because of the migration of the Northeasterners that are cash laden with good incomes, and they have really propped up the South Florida market, where other markets around the country, we're seeing the effects of these higher mortgage rates. It's amounted to slower sales, growing inventories, more of a equilibrium headed towards a buyer's market, where it's been a total seller's market over the last 3 or 4 years. I think in particular in South Florida, the mortgage rates have hurt the majority of South Floridians that have been in the area for years, that don't have these high incomes. It's made it much more difficult. I think it's made it very difficult, if not impossible, for first-time buyers. We've also seen prices rise now. Median price for a condo in Miami-Dade now is about $440,000. Median price for a single-family home is $624,000. In Broward County, it's about $480,000 for a condo and $660,000 for a single-family home. Palm Beach is actually trending a little bit higher. So while we've seen the mortgage rates increase and tighter lending, we have also seen a rapid escalation. A couple of years ago, I think it was 25% increase in the median price of a home. In many ways, it's priced a lot of South Floridians out of the marketplace. And now they're looking at moving to the outskirts, to the far western edges. They're moving up to Indian River County, St. Lucie County, or in some cases, they're leaving the state altogether for a better standard of living than what they can enjoy in South Florida. To me, it's a real shame, because these are the real South Floridians. And now we have this influx of Northeasterners that have propped up the market. They've escalated prices, especially in the luxury homes. But I think that is also changing now too. We're not going to see this continued flow of migration from the Northeast. They're going to have a harder time selling their homes up there for the money that they've been able to get in recent times. And companies now are cracking back on working at home, working remotely, and they're drawing those people back into their empty offices that they've been paying for. So I think it's been harder for South Floridians. Now I think we're going to see a curtailment of this huge migration. We'll still see them coming down. It's always been that way in Florida, but it's not going to be this mass exodus from the Northeast down to Florida that it has been in the last 3 or 4 years. So I think maybe you're noticing it in some areas already. where sales are down, where inventory is now picking up, where sellers are now negotiating prices, lowering list prices, where before they were getting, they put the house up on the market, they'd get 10 or 20 bids, most of them above list price, a lot of them all cash. It's a changing marketplace. It's been a feast really, and it's been a feast for most everybody in real estate the last few years. That's changing now. It's transitioning, and I think what you're going to find is you're going to have to work a lot harder to get the same type of sales volume that you've been enjoying in the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay. And let's see. Question number 2.
Can I piggyback on what you said?
Yeah.
Jack, I want to piggyback on what you just said about the changing market. With what you just shared, as far as the economy, do you see the recent federal class action commission lawsuits impacting those predictions and that forecast in terms of business? And I say that because while realtors clearly have to work harder today than 24 months ago to generate business, there's also the question of whether or not they can generate income from half the transactions they're accustomed to. So in your analysis, are you utilizing this new information that is just 4 or 5 weeks old, of this new business model that we potentially all going to be facing across the country? Or is that part and parcel above and beyond already these challenges we're facing due to the economy, inflation, interest rates, and economic slowdown?
I think it really affects buyers agents, Ben, those that have been specializing in representing buyers, because I think what you're going to see now in the near future is sellers are not going to be paying 6 and 7% covering the buyer's agent's commission. I think what you're going to see is maybe it's going to be 2.5 or 3% to the seller, nothing for the buyer. And the buyer's agents are going to have to focus on making their income directly from the customers that they're representing. So, and I would caution you that you need to, as we see this unfold, as we see this transition, you're going to need to have something set up with your clients where you can collect income from them prior to the closing. Because I think a lot of buyers may find a way not to pay you at the closing table, and it's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000. So it's going to require direct work with your buyers. I don't see sellers as paying commissions to the buyer's agent anymore. I think that's kind of a dinosaur. It's a thing of the past. We're going to see it move along. And so buyers are going to have to collect their incomes from the clients that they represent, no longer from the sellers. It should, in ways, provide better service to the buyer's clients because they are not beholden to the seller for their commission. So it could be a very good thing for the general public. But as far as for agents themselves, I think you guys are going to see a big transition in the coming years in your business. And it's not going to be where the seller pays both sides of the commission. They're only going to pay one side, and you're going to have to collect your incomes if you're a buyer's agent directly from your client. And you're going to have to find a structure to do so. Maybe it's a retainer, maybe it's monthly. I don't know what you're going to find, but I think you're going to have to collect your incomes directly from the buyers in the future. Now, if you're a seller, a listing agent, generally the splits on average 6-7%, half to the seller's agent, half to the buyer, split with their brokers. I think the sellers are going to remain the same, and I think you may find that buyer's agents may look to transition to become more listing agents in the future because it's a more secure income.
Here's an interesting perspective on that.
I'm sorry?
So an interesting perspective that leads to question is everyone becomes a listing agent now, but there's no one to show the house. Because nobody wants to work for free.
Jack, I'm thinking about moving to Mexico and becoming a paid speaker. What do you think?
Well, it's a wonderful paradise down here, and if you get your citizenship or your temporary or permanent residence, there's a tremendous amount of opportunities in Mexico. The flood that you've seen in South Florida is very comparable to what we're seeing in many markets here in Mexico as well. I happen to live in Cabo San Lucas. We have,
I like.
we have. It looks a lot like South Florida. There's condo buildings going up everywhere. That shot up in price. We've seen prices increase almost double in the last 3 years. So there's a lot of opportunity in Mexico, but I think we've seen, because of the political climate and the animosity in the country right now, and a lot of folks that are looking at living outside the U.S. that maybe hadn't considered it before in their life. So, it wouldn't do you any harm, I think, to learn about a foreign market that is becoming an American expat area.
That's it. I'm out of here. Yeah.
There may be some opportunity there as well.
Jack, do you see any solution for the 1,000 agents or 1,500 agents that Ben has here, of which 50% represent buyers and 50% represent sellers? What do you do if you're a buyer's agent? Now, I'm going to sell you $1 million entry-level home in Boca Raton, because that's the new entry level. And I got to say to you, hey, by the way, you're going to have to pay me $30,000 to represent you. How do you go about that, or how do you combat that?
Well, it's a really good question, Marshall, and I think that is going to evolve over time as well. I think the important thing is, if you're a buyer's agent, to say that the way commission structures were in the past, I was somewhat beholden to present the seller in the best light that I could, because I have a financial obligation to that seller who's paying that commission. Now, I don't know if buyers even realize that in the past, but I think in the future, I think it's going to be more a mix of just listing agent and selling agent, maybe a combination of both. And I think you're going to have to find a way. I mean, what I would say is, I am a buyer's agent. I totally represent you. I'm going to tell you which are the good projects, which are the ones to stay away from, which are the ones that have had problems in the past, which developers haven't followed through with their warranty items, or have been known to do poor construction or not deliver their properties on schedule. But I'm going to represent you to the very best of my ability, and to try and help you stay away from making a bad decision. Now, maybe in the past I couldn't do that because I was getting my commission from the seller, so I'm trying to present each and every one of them in the best possible light. Now I'm only beholden to you. And so I'm going to do my very, very best for you. And I'm going to work very hard for you. So, and then finding...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we just want to be very careful from a Florida statute, Chapter 475 standpoint. Words like beholden, loyalty, fiduciary, representation, we want to be very cognizant, because there's marketing terminology to sell yourself, and then there's potentially violations of law based on representation. I know the signature agents never act as single agents. We always act as transaction brokers. I would imagine most of the Florida best agents, if not all, are that as well. And I don't want to get into a technical debate over Chapter 475, but I think the bigger spin is when you're trying to present yourself to a buyer and justify your worst, you have to justify it based upon your attentiveness, your ability to show property, be responsive, be knowledgeable, have expertise. have wherewithal, but your probably biggest strength is negotiating the most favorable terms for them. Because obedience and loyalty and fiduciary all start to dance and skirt around Chapter 475, which could get us into a whole other world of conversation and potential challenges. So I would recommend to all the agents to use elements that Jack shared, but focus heavily on your ability to be available, be knowledgeable, be familiar with off-market properties that might not be available through Zillow and Realtor.com, and most importantly, assure them that you're going to beat the hell out of the seller and the listing agent to get them the best possible price. Whereas if they go at it as a layperson, they're assured to not get the best possible price. Most people are misled to think if they go directly to the listing agent that they are going to save the buyer's side with the commission. That couldn't be anything farther from the truth. If I'm a listing agent and a foolish buyer comes directly to me trying to carve out their own agent and not be represented, then either I'm going to just double my income or just assure that my seller makes more money. But I'm not going to pass those savings on to the unrepresented buyer. I'm going to take maximum advantage of hustling that unrepresented buyer because they're not knowledgeable, they don't know what they're doing, and I'm going to take that as an advantage in my negotiations. So just want the agents to keep that in mind.
And Ben, couldn't a simple solution, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but couldn't a simple solution be, I'm the listing agent and I charge 6% to list the property. And at my discretion, I decide to give half of my money to someone else that brings a buyer. Right?
The discretion also has to come on paper. So it's not only your own personal business opinions approach, it's also how you structured your agreements. And the Florida Association of Realtors, Florida Realtors, the nickname, they are in the process of reworking a lot of their disclosures to take into account these changing commissions. And I know that we're very actively involved in helping them with that. We use our proprietary documents here. We don't use the Florida Realtor documents at Signature. I know Florida's Best does, but it's important that you're using effective documentation to convey the essence of the recent ruling to try to mitigate future claims against your broker. Again, that's all other discussion. My real question you answered, and that's, all the pain that the realtors are feeling doesn't even yet take into account the fact that half their income could potentially be impacted by lack of commission sharing. And they have to factor in a very, very quick revamp of their business approach to make sure they are charging their buyers proper compensation. Because I suspect as we analyze the MLS, we're going to continue to see MLS payouts getting smaller and smaller and smaller over time. Well,
Agreed, Ben. But I think that the industry is in transition. And it's not going to be the status quo anymore. I think things are going to continue to change. The age of technology is also ushering in these changes. Just look at how Zillow tried to corner the market on being a national brokerage. Of course, that didn't work out for them, but we're going to see more and more, changes in the future. This one in particular, with the sellers not being responsible to pay the buyer's commissions in the future. Now, that may change with market conditions as well. If we get into much more of a buyer's market, we're going to see sellers offer to pay higher commissions, more favorable terms, more giveaways, more buy downs on interest rates, and so forth. So everything's kind of in transition right now. I really expected we were going to see a recession either late this year or early next year. And now I would say chances are that we're probably not going to see that, with it being an election year as well. And I think we'll probably continue to see some lowering in the interest rates as inflation continues to come down. We saw the Dow Jones hit over 36,000 for the first time last week. So the unemployment is down very low right now. Where inflation is coming down, we're seeing more favorable economic conditions, but we're also seeing many markets in the United States that have become overpriced, overheated real estate markets. And I think that, to me, it's supply, demand, and affordability are the three big keys to determining pricing structure. And I think in many areas right now, it's become unaffordable. and especially for first-time buyers and initial move-up buyers. The well-heeled, the luxury buyers, they have money, they're going to buy what they want. But like I tell most people, the reason they have money is usually because they're not stupid. They've been smart and they buy low and sell high, and they're not going to look to buy at the top of the market if it looks like prices are on their way down. So I think that you're going to see changes, I think, in number of sales and in growing inventory in the coming months as well.
I think we are in a recession, even though we don't have 2 negative quarters of GDP. I just think that the economy's propped up by people still living off of their COVID money. You've got the millennials living with mom and dad. If the millennials actually had the balls to go out and get their own apartments and houses, they would all be upside down, but they have money to spend because they're not paying rent. As far as credit cards go, credit card deficits are at an all-time high in terms of people maxing them out. So we have all these tools that allow us to mask being in a recession. And I doubt for a second that we're in one, but because you have such large tranches of the economy living off the COVID money, not spending what they would normally be spending in a normal environment, that allows the federal government to parade itself around saying we're not in a recession, because there's all these other elements going on. People are still utilizing the experiments they had off of the tremendous amounts of cash they got flush with during COVID industries to pay their cost of living now. And if they weren't flush with that extra money down on the government stipends, then we would feel the implications of the negative GDP for 2 consecutive quarters, I believe. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's the simple definition of a recession as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. Last quarter, we had 4.9% GDP, the highest ever. So, and you're right, I agree with you. There are different things that are masking it. It's much more complex. I mean, I think inflation is much higher than it's been reported because they don't consider many things that have shot up in cost. But, you know, I just think with it being an election year, we're not going to see that simple definition met of 2 negative consecutive quarters of GDP.
Agreed. In the chat log, you've got 2 active questions.
Let's get to the debt.
Okay, we'll get to this next. Marshall's got a list then for you.
I just want to, I don't want to lose sight. We're already at 12:30. This is a big kicker. And this is, I can tell you personally, I got slammed on my commercial properties with increases of up to 500% this year. That is insurance. So rates on some condos, single family, HOA, general liability policies, and commercial have gone up as much as, I said 500 because that was my maximum increase. Maybe they went up more for other people in 2023. How will this trickle down into the market in 2024, given that on some of my properties, my insurance is more than my mortgage and taxes combined?
Yeah, insurance is that one factor that most people don't talk about that much or consider in a residential purchase or commercial acquisition. Insurance rates have shot up in Florida. I mean, it's incredible. You know, we used to talk about the price of homes going up and the price of property taxes, but once you buy, you've got a homeowner's exemption or a homestead exemption that limits your increases in property taxes, but nothing that limits your increases in insurance. We saw Citizens become the largest insurer in the state of Florida. Many of the mainstream insurance companies have pulled out because of what's considered, incredible liability in the state of Florida due to hurricane damage. And now Citizens, we see, is kind of feeding some of their policies to smaller companies now to try and lower their risk as well. Florida's been very fortunate overall, and especially Southeast Florida in the last few years with not getting devastating hurricanes. They've seen it happen on the West Coast. And I think that that's the one problem with insurance. what are they going to do? Are they going to regulate it? Are they going to set certain limitations for how much? Because I mean, it's insurance is pricing people out of their homes now. It's gotten to that level, especially those that are on more fixed incomes and senior citizens that cannot afford these incredible jumps in their insurance costs. It's also affecting commercial business owners like Marshall and others that have to increase their prices to try and cover the cost of these increasing insurance costs. So insurance is that kind of one thing that's out there. What's going to happen? Is the legislature going to do anything? You know, I would say the legislature over the last number of years has been more insurance company friendly than it has limiting them, and being more for the consumer. I don't know what's going to happen with insurance, but I know they've got to do something to limit the cost. Now, what happens if you get hit by a major hurricane this next summer and there's $100 billion in damage? What is that going to do to the insurance industry? That's the one kind of, you know, thing that's out there that we cannot predict. But if it happens, it could be devastating to the marketplace, not only for the cost and the repairs and everything that goes along with the hurricane damage, but the additional cost to insurance after that. Are we gonna, you know, I think the rich are probably gonna self-insure because they can. Others that have mortgages, quite honestly, I don't know what they're going to do. If there's going to be some, you know, some companies that step forward and come up with a plan that is agreeable to the banks for maybe a more limited coverage. Maybe it's something that only covers mortgage costs and not total replacement costs. But we're going to have to see some changes in insurance because right now it's pricing people out of their homes.